welcome to How To Roundtable Talks episode 3, presented by #Merky Books and Beats by Dre. With me, I have Niran Vinod and Damola Timeyin, authors of How to Build It, and Grace Beverley, founder of sustainable brand Tala. Welcome, guys. Thank you for joining me. Let's start with the book, How to Build It. Where did the inspiration for the book come from?
Our careers. I think being in this game for a long time and advertising, you kind of want to pass on your knowledge.
How do you go about going from concept to the page?
Well, actually, I remember the meeting we had. We sat there and went through what does a story look like? What kind of story do you want to tell? What is a narrative if you want to help someone build a brand? What would be the most useful thing for them to read? And I think it started from there. But obviously, things change as you start to write a book. You come up with a plan, and then that plan kind of disintegrates as you start to write it, and then you patch it back together again. And that's how it felt, kind of building a book felt a bit like building a brand, to be honest.
So I want to talk today about how you actually build it. Grace, as somebody who has built a brand, how do you know when you've got an idea that is worth bringing to life?
Every idea I've had that has ended up as a concept that's a brand has changed so much along the way. I've had like an initial idea, had something that I think would work, and then it's just being kind of like battered in all directions from like criticism, what's actually possible, and then has come out the other end. So I feel like you just got to listen to the criticism and, the different ideas you have and the capabilities, and then you'll kind of have something in the end.
Niran, is there like criteria for you or something that lets you know that an idea is worth turning into something bigger?
I always say ideas are cheap. It's all about execution. I think we all have so many ideas that we get gassed about, but till you actually put it out in the world, like Grace said, you don't learn. You need to learn from it and iterate and change as you go along.
How do you make those ideas achievable? I think you can kind of have these grand ideas on paper. How do you turn those things into achievable moments?
I don't think there's a template, but from the experiences I've had, turning it from an idea on paper to something in real life, I think starts with testing it. Whether it's a small concept, you test it with the audience, you ask them, is there something that can work for you? You test it, you build a prototype, and I love the idea of like a minimum viable product. Like, what is the smallest thing that you can pull together that you can test with real people? And I think doing that consistently, like starting small, building on it, testing it, starting again, building on it, testing it, is probably a good way of doing it.
Grace, what's your way of bringing ideas into the world? Have you had loads of ideas that have just ended up on the cutting room floor?
Well, I feel like we all have ideas every day. Like, we're all like, oh, I wish this worked better. And then we say like, oh, you could make this. Any brand that I bought to launch has been, at that point, I've thought, this is great. Like, I've worked so hard on this. It's been like a year inception, whatever it might be. And then you kind of think this is amazing. And then you look back a year later and you're like, God, if I released that now, I wouldn't be happy. So I guess there is this kind of idea that like, if you don't cringe at what you started with, then you like started too late. And so kind of just getting started and actually making something work, and then you can adapt and change, because your customer might be completely different from what you think they are as well. So I feel like that's definitely something that people should bring into it.
Are there specific steps though in turning something from an idea into a tangible thing? Like if I'm sitting here now with an idea, what would you tell me would be the first step I should take?
So Damola mentioned it around user research, understanding what your audience needs. There's various ways of doing that. So building a prototype and putting it out into market, but doing research groups, understanding what they need, what they're interested in, what type of products. So if you have concepts, run it by them, and then build a prototype with partners.
I also feel like one of the important things is like looking at the capabilities as well, because like if you're going to create something completely new, it's going to take a lot of money and it's going to take a lot of like new capabilities. Whereas like if you're just solving a problem that people have with an existing product, then it's probably not going to take as much. You're probably going to be able to go to similar manufacturers. You need to be able to get what the user is going to say, but you also need to look at it and be like, is this going to cost like £1 million to create? Because if it's going to do that, then it might not be scalable kind of at this stage with what I've got. So I completely agree with that. And then it's also looking at kind of like what's possible, because you're also not going to be able to build a spaceship just by being like, this would be great. So yeah.
I want to come back to talking about resources actually and spending money on ideas, but kind of revisiting what you say about speaking to your audience. How easy is it to just let go of an idea when the audience isn't feeling it?
It's going to be tough, because a lot of the time these ideas are like your babies, right? And you feel vulnerable sharing, the ideas, your thoughts with people, and getting criticism is really difficult, but it's necessary pain. at the same time, you might not be speaking to the right audience. If you're building something and you're going, Mum, is this something you like? Is this product going to work for you? But you're not building a product that is meant for mums, then you're probably not speaking to the right person to get that feedback. You see what I mean? So I guess finding the right audience to get feedback from is super important, because they'll give you different feedback depending on who they are and what they need. So find the right person to get feedback from, ask them the right questions, and you might hear something actually quite useful. Speak to the wrong person and they might tell you something that's ridiculous. And if you stop at that point because the wrong person gave you the wrong feedback, then you might have destroyed your dream, and who knows what could have happened. Have you had experience of...
Well, I was thinking of like, there are so many ideas that you look at brand stories and you kind of look at it and you're like, oh my God, you started 30 years ago. Like, of course there's a product that wouldn't have worked until now. And I think if you really believe in an idea, then there often is something in it. I feel like ideas that, for example, that I've kind of tried to justify, for example, like if you're at dinner with a friend and you're like, oh no, this is what it is. And they're like, oh, but isn't that exactly like this? And you have to justify it further and you have to do that. And even just through that process, you're like honing the concept and you're making it something that's stronger. And if you need to justify that to someone at a dinner, then you're going to need to justify that to like in your marketing. And so what's really important is like allowing that criticism to get through. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a wrong idea. It might, as you say, mean that it's to the wrong audience, it's slightly the wrong concept, it's the wrong price point. Like there are so many different things that could come into an idea changing. Being able to actually hone that concept and have it like battered into shape has been so important for me, actually bringing in a thing that's been like, oh, okay, this is really good, or this is profitable, or whatever it might be.
When do you know, though, when you need to refine an idea or when you just need to call it quits on an idea?
I feel like when people keep attacking it.
Is there something for you when you know what, park that and start fresh?
I'll talk from Adland experience. Clients will just kill it. I think when it goes into several different iterations, and by that point your idea doesn't even look like what you started with, and it's so watered down, and you know they're going to pull the plug at some point. And also the whole emotional attachment to ideas, when you've been in advertising for a while, you learn not to get too emotionally invested in ideas that almost throw away at some point.
But I think the emotion is important. If you've got an idea and you do not love what it's turned into because of the feedback and the way that it's evolved, then you probably should park it. So if you've turned it into a Frankenstein, you look at it, you're like, oh, I hate that. Yeah. How much fun are you going to have?
You also need to have passion in it.
Yeah, you need that passion, I think. So give up when you don't love it anymore.
Speaking of that passion, there are a lot of people who have ideas, but it's a side hustle, and I've got to go to my 9 to 5, and I'll do that in my free time. Does that work?
I mean, if you love sleep, then it's difficult. Basically, you need to, like, everyone's got 24 hours of the day, but how you use it will differ. So I think side hustles require time, energy, and you need to find a way of getting that energy and finding that time. So when I was side hustling, I guess, came home from work and I spent hours after work on the side hustle, the weekends on the side hustle, and that felt good. It was like working out. So that's difficult. I mean, you've had plenty of side hustles. How's it been?
Yeah, I mean, it energizes me. It's usually when I'm frustrated with my day job, I want an outlet and build something on the side where I own it. But I've never fully transitioned into it because I want it to remain side hustle, keep me excited. And you also realistically got bills to pay.
Yeah. But some people say, I didn't realize until I took the leap, until I stopped looking at it as a hobby and I turned it into a business.
I feel like there's like this school of thought in like some entrepreneurs who look at things and they go kind of like, no, if you didn't jump into it, you didn't believe it in enough, you had like self-doubt, how can people believe in your product? And it's like, it's quite inaccessible because like, first of all, everyone has bills to pay. I think also there's like a huge amount of situation that goes into building something like that. So for example, for me, when I was, I guess, side hustling, it was just at uni. So I just went to a really intense uni. And at the time I was like, the only time I can work on this is if I do like my uni and work as a day job and then come home and do this afterwards. Within the time I was there, I hired like more people to keep it going than I would have if I was just doing it myself. So I feel like actually doing something and not being able to give your full time to it often makes you a lot more productive in the time you have and a lot more kind of effective with what you're doing because you have to really streamline everything. And like for me, that came in the form of actually hiring people that I would have been like, oh no, the business isn't big enough to hire people. Whereas at the time I was like, I can't compromise my uni. Like I have to do this, and I like promised myself I'm going to do this. So I'm going to hire people, and I literally just hired fresh grads, and I was like, this is the idea. This is what we're going to do, and that's how I made it happen. Whereas a few years later in my life, I probably would have been like, oh no, I'm not hiring people, going to do everything myself. And it's actually probably also a way where people can really make an idea take off by essentially putting more people into it, looking at it more efficiently and effectively, and kind of saying, what do I need to do to make this happen? Or, as we said, kind of getting a minimal viable product out there, and seeing kind of what happens. But for me, it was like very much like a catalyst to it actually doing well, because I made decisions that I wouldn't have made otherwise. As you said, we only have 24 hours a day.
How hard is it when you're trying to build something to bring people in that you're then going to trust with your vision?
It's very hard. Like I've always found it really hard. Now, for example, I'm just as involved time-wise, but I won't be as involved like in the actual like day-to-day of kind of seeing every piece of work. But it's so easy to micromanage everything because it is your baby. And I think the thing is you learn what types of people you need to hire, how you hire them, and that's how you make it work. If you aren't able to do that, and if you're not hiring the right people, you're never going to be able to hand it over. But it's always hard. And I think the way it gets better and better is when you're able to hire people that are better than you at everything. And so then it's like, great, I'm this person. You're better than me at marketing. You're better than me at content. You're better than me at all of these things. And then it's like, wow, this business is so much better than I am. And that's the ideal, because then you're able to delegate because you want to give it to those people.
How important would you say it is to delegate, though, when you're trying to build an idea?
It's crucial. I don't think you can scale a business unless you get comfortable with the idea of giving parts of the business essentially away to other people to execute. One, you don't have the time or energy to do everything. And two, you probably don't have the expertise to do everything well. And as Grace said, that there are people that are better than you at certain things. So why not allow those people to do what they're really good at to help grow the business? And I think you almost need to build trust into whatever system and environment you're in, so you can trust them to deliver and they can trust you to get off their back and let them do their job.
Niran, you mentioned earlier bills need to be paid. And of course, money often sits at the heart of the development of an idea. But do you need money to get an idea off the ground?
100% believe you do need money if you want to quit your main hustle and do your side hustle, you need a certain amount of revenue you feel comfortable to do that at.
How do you go about that? Again, so imagine I've got an idea and I just feel like I haven't got the resources.
There's so many different routes into that. I'm going to point to you, Grace, for that one.
So I feel like for me, the way I started, because both my businesses are still self-funded, so they've essentially been like bootstrapped. So like all revenue goes back into that to build it. And the only way that was even able to start was by digital products. So digital products, you essentially technically kind of only need your time. I also at the time paid, like, it was me and my friend who was a graphic design student, and I paid her 50 quid to literally put it onto like an InDesign type thing, and then it would look nice. And that was how we were able to even get like a product out there that essentially only involved my time, and then I kind of sat on Shopify and like put things into a theme and was like, okay, this works. Other than that, like, of course you need money. If you like, sampling's expensive, like especially if you're doing something that's like an entirely new concept, of course it's going to be expensive. I guess it's about, you can do things like obviously getting a loan from a bank, you can look at investment, you can look at seed investment, you can raise money from friends and family. That's a really key investment kind of option. But what you do need is you need some sort of savings, because whether you're going to jump ship and leave your full-time job, or whether you're going to use that money for samples or whatever it is, like, you need that. But I often think that's quite helpful. You have to really get that concept down and make sure you're doing things kind of as specifically as possible. Every process is so expensive. So it's either about getting people who are on the same, like in the same boat, wanting to join you. Either you pull together on money or time, so you're kind of putting what you have into it. So it's either like two resources, time, money. How can you spend them?
You get to the point where you are with Tala, and you've got resources, you've got a client base. How do you then maintain a sort of a work-life balance?
Work-life balance is difficult. I kind of look at it as like boundaries rather than barriers, because I have rules, for example, that I'll, as of 2020, this is my first year taking weekends, and it's been great. And I feel like that was one of the most effective things I could do for my life. If you are self-employed or if you are an entrepreneur, whatever it might be, there's always more work to do. So you have to create these boundaries, but you also have to know that sometimes they're going to move and sometimes you have to be flexible with that. That's why they're not barriers. And so like, you know, if we're coming up to a huge launch, I might just have a Sunday rather than a Saturday, and then I can fill that time with what I want to, and I know that I'm being, you know, as productive as possible in the rest of the time, and I'm not going to get this kind of burnout.
What about you?
I need to set some boundaries.
Are you just realising that now?
Honestly, I mean, I haven't necessarily been good at setting boundaries, but I think in terms of achieving work-life balance, I always make sure there are things that I'm passionate about that aren't related to the hustle. And having those things kind of steals my focus in a good way. Without them, I just continue working. So having passions that aren't related to that kind of goal of building business or brand, I think is super important.
But there are so many attitudes, right, that get drilled into your head, like winners never sleep. And you know what I mean? Beyonce has the same amount of hours in the day as you. Like, how do you work in a way that is sustainable?
I think in my early 20s, I was down that route of I can sleep 3 hours a day and be okay and party and still come home and do the hustle. But now I'm 32, I'm like, I can't do that. I need my sleep. Rest and recovery is important for the mindset, for inspiration.
To be successful, it seems as though you need to not necessarily work harder, but work smarter.
I mean, working smart is hard, so I kind of feel like this whole thing of like work smart, not hard is like, I think it's slightly, I agree with it, because it's like you've got to be, there's this idea of like effectiveness, so kind of efficiency and productivity, but like in the right direction, because if you're productive but you're doing the wrong thing, then it's like useless. But the problem with this is like this whole culture has just glamorized the idea of burnout. That is not pretty, like that's not glamorous, and that is not what the hustle looks like, where you genuinely cannot produce the work you need to produce. If you're running on reserve tanks, you're going to pay it back at some point. Like I get 8 hours of sleep a night, like, and I'm like, I try and be really clear about that, because otherwise people, you know, people do say things like, oh, you know, same 24 hours in the day. It's like, I also have an assistant, I also have like this. And so does Beyonce. Like Beyonce will have teams, like she has these huge teams, and so do, like, you are never in a parallel life position to anyone else.
Yeah.
So being able to look at yourself and your own work routine is important, and your own balance is important, and what you want from that. But looking at everyone and being like, well, they don't sleep, is always going to be a lie unless they are dead. Because that is the only thing that's going to happen if you don't sleep, or you're not going to be able to produce.
I totally agree with that. I mean, it's kind as you were speaking, you mentioned the fact that people that seemingly do lots of stuff, they have teams around them. They've got resources. Like these slogans and catchphrases are great as an Instagram post, but they're not the reality. Like next to that Instagram post should be, I've got an assistant and I've got someone who's going to deal with other things so I can focus on this specific task. Like that is the only way these things work. So, I mean, the culture around, I mean, we called it hustle porn in the book, is a fallacy.
Hustle porn.
Yeah, I mean, it's just not real. It's not real life.
So it's about realising that these mantras come with like a little caveat.
Yeah, and I kind of also feel like as someone who uses social media, I think it's the fact that we've kind of had this kind of categorization of like, no, you need to either have like superhuman productivity and kind of focus and all of these things, or you're lazy, or you're whatever.
But you mentioned how social media kind of warps this perception of productivity. Is it also a really good tool though now for building an idea out of nothing?
Yeah, I mean, I've built both businesses out of social media, and that's kind of like the way they've been able to grow. It's a very good leveler in terms of being able to get audiences that might have otherwise been really expensive to acquire. So they might have required a lot of marketing or advertising, or they might have, you know, like required really putting it out on some sort of platform or a billboard or whatever. If you have a good idea on social media, if you market it in the right way, likelihood is it's going to get out. I think it's fantastic. Like there are so many amazing things about social media. One of the worst things about it, though, is that you're never seeing a 24-hour broadcast. And even if you did see a 24-hour broadcast, the next 24 hours wouldn't look the same. It's impossible. And also, we can't consume that amount of information. So it's always going to give you some sort of warped perception, even if you know there's a warped perception.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, it's loaded, I feel.
Use social media, don't let it use you.
Yeah, essentially.
Yeah. What would your, the gem you would share that's been given to you? So is there an inspirational bit of information or a business gem that has been given to you that you now live by, or that kind of informs how you approach the development of ideas?
The nugget that I kind of take with me, and whether it was working in the startup or working in advertising or now working on the platform side, is just about understanding the audience. It is incredibly crucial. How are you going to figure out whether this idea works unless you speak to people, you understand your audience? When I was working at Osper, it's just, a bank for kids, the thing I loved about that experience was how fixated we were on the people we were building the product for. To the point where we were like, actually, if we're building a bank for young people, we're going to go and speak to young people about their relationship with money. And that experience was incredible because you learned so much. And I think unless you are obsessed about the audience you're building for, it's unlikely that you're going to build something that's going to grow and be successful eventually. So that's my thing. Be obsessed about your audience.
Be obsessed with your audience. Naran, what about you? What's
I said it in the book, actually.
the gem that you live by?
It's sort of about brand, but also personal level. If you don't ask, you don't get. So if you're passionate about what you're doing and you want to make a connection somewhere, just ask. The worst case scenario, they don't reply, you get a rejection. Best case scenario, out of 100 emails, you get one response, and that one person changes your life forever.
Good one to live by. Grace, what about you?
So one thing I keep going on about recently is just reading. Like, it's like I'm sponsored by books. Like, I just think that reading is so important, and I think that the way I've been able to conquer a lot of my kind of self-doubt from generally just like being young, being inexperienced in what I'm doing, is just reading. Like, you don't need to read a whole book, you don't need to read a whole chapter, you can read articles, reports, like things you're interested in. Ever since I've introduced that, it doesn't matter if I go into a room and I actually don't know what people are talking about, and I kind of sit there and I'm like, this is my company, like I should know what people are talking about. I'm able to say like, hey, like, could you explain that to me? Because I know that like my knowledge might be elsewhere and that I'm able to offer other things. And I feel like empowering yourself with the education of reading, even if it's like aside from your job, even if it's just things you're passionate about, is that extra angle that you're able to bring to things. If you like think about how, sound like very weird, but if you think about how many like books there are out there on like every single different subject, those are people that have like often dedicated their lives to doing that thing. So if you read that book, like you're able to profit off of all that information in like however many days, or just in like while you're having breakfast, just reading one chapter or whatever it might be. And like it's such just like a cheap, accessible education in everything. Yeah. And so for me, that has been something that has like changed the way I work, just making sure I'm reading a bit every day.
How important is collaboration to you? Like, how do you decide when it's necessary to work with other people, with other brands, and how do you decide who you should be working with?
I feel like collaboration is so important if you're trying to build something with minimal money, because you can always benefit from other people's customers, other people's expertise, other people's ideas. So very important, I would say.
What do you think you should be looking for when finding those people to collaborate with?
For example, and this is actually with the book, this is the only book that's been co-authored by two people. When I was approached, I was like, this is an interesting opportunity. I can't do this myself. And I wanted to reach out to someone who's smarter than me, Damola.
I want to be like you,
Be like you, fam. Yeah, I wanted to work with someone who I respected and wanted to work with, but also smarter than me and can push me to execute this perfectly. Yeah.
Is it important then, do you think, when building a concept, a brand, to work with people that are smarter than you?
I believe so. People that can push you further and make you think out of the box. You're limited by what you know, and other people bring in a fresh, new perspective to your idea.
This book has been the perfect example of a collaboration. Like, we're friends before we were co-authors. Never worked together before, but this worked, and we collaborated throughout the process, and it was easy because, one, we respect each other, and I think, two, we kind of have a similar but also different perspective, and you can bring all of those things into a room. And we found a way to make it work. In general, collaboration, I think, is incredibly important. You can tell, or you look at some identity and go, that's literally just one person's thought that's been like literally driven through, and you can tell the ideas have had like a combination of different perspectives baked into it. And what I really love actually is getting to a point where you can look through your address book pick out your friends. You go, right, this group of people, we can make something amazing.
It's interesting because you hear two sides of that. You hear people say, don't work with your friends. And then you hear people say, oh, no, it's great to work with your friends. What's the right answer?
I feel like it totally, completely depends on the person. So I've worked with friends and family, yet my go-to thing is usually saying, I wouldn't actively kind of hire friends and family because then it more changes the dynamic. It's really difficult, especially if there's power dynamic there. And I've kind of made that mistake before and kind of been like, okay, it doesn't work well because your friendship or your relationship or whatever it might be is always more important. But that being said, I think you can collaborate with friends 100%, and I think that you should. And I've worked with almost every member of my family. I've really made an effort to do that because I think it's important, and I think you can really get the expertise and the collaboration there. I would say from personal experience, generally hiring specifically as a job, generally not unless it's kind of been on that basis before, just because usually your relationship or friendship is more important.
I agree completely with that. I've been in that situation.
That sounds like you've hired your cousin before and it's gone.
Well, I mean, that has also happened. But no, I've been the friend that was hired and it didn't work out. And it took a while to mend the relationship, which was really difficult. It was traumatic because you come into a situation thinking, it's just going to be great. You're working with your friend. And then you figure out that you don't work well together. So I think...
It's really awkward if it's...
Oh, I mean...
No. Wait, you telling me something?
Bro, I love you, man. No, but this is a different situation. We're in it together. This is an equal partnership and, we've created something together. So I agree, collaborate with friends, think long and hard before you want to start hiring friends.
When you are working by yourself or you're working on your own brand, how do you upskill?
Reading is the first thing that you should be looking to do because people have experiences that you don't have. Find people that have the skills that you need and figure out whether they can help you learn or teach you or work alongside you so you can learn from them. That's always been the way I've done it, kind of be close to people with amazing skills or that are smarter than you and you kind of go, right, I can learn something from you.
Yeah. Grace, how did you upskill to get your brand to the place where it is today?
All about hiring people who are better than you at their expertise. And if that's not possible at the time, being able to kind of grow together. So as I said, what I first did with Tala, actually at the time it was across the two brands because I was I just need extra hands and I just hired fresh grads and I was this is what the brand is, this is what we do, this is how we're going to do it, we're going to do this many posts, we're going to do this. And so being able to get their expertise, even if it was just innate ability, was amazing. But being able to build that and then instill that quality of wanting to grow as well. And I think that, people will fall off along the way, people will decide that's not what they want to do, but you have to have this, and that's what's so great about startup culture, is the fact that people want to grow, they want to improve, they're all purpose driven by the whatever your organization is doing. But you have to have that, you all have to kind of have that idea that okay, it's going to be long hours, okay, it require kind of personal and emotional investment. And then we kind of go from there.
Damola, obviously a lot of self-belief is needed when developing and building ideas. So how do you overcome self-doubt?
I think the first thing is that having a bit of self-doubt is not a bad thing. In fact, a bit of that is a bit healthy. Kind of comes with a bit of humility, but overcoming it, kind of go, I'm not sure I can do this. I doubt whether or not I can achieve this goal or meet this objective. I think if you ever feel like you're in that situation, the first thing I would encourage people to do is to try. Easier said than done, but trying to challenge that doubt by doing something is important because it doesn't necessarily matter if you fail.
Yeah.
Because I think on the other side or next to self-doubt is that fear of failure. I doubt I can do this. I'm not going to try doing it because I also think I might fail. But going, actually, it's all right to fail. Yeah, fantastic. You learn in that failure. So I think overcoming self-doubt is all about confronting it and trying it and being comfortable with failure. Being determined enough to try something is important when you are facing that self-doubt dilemma.
Niran, how do you come out the other side whenever you feel self-doubt?
When you mentioned the book, when I got the email initially, I was like, I can't do this. It's madness. I'm not a writer. Then it was actually making a plan. That was Damola's brains there. He made a structured plan. I was like, I can do this. We can achieve this in, I think we wrote in 3 weeks.
And what about you? When it comes to self-doubt, how do you overcome that?
What I've realised recently is there are kind of two different types of self-doubt. There's self-doubt kind of believing you actually can't do something and like a lack of confidence in whatever it is. And then there's like imposter syndrome, which is obviously a very classic type of self-doubt that's experienced by a lot of people. And I have realised that I actually don't have traditional self-doubt that much, just because I kind of, as you say, like I just do it. I just kind of do it, and I'm like, well, worst comes to worst, like I'll just plan it, and then if it looks like it's not going to work, then that's a practical solution rather than being based off my emotion. And so kind of being like, okay, quite pragmatic about it, like logically, how's this going to work? Writing it down and being like, okay, yeah, this doesn't work because of the idea, or this, like it never, I feel like something will never not work because of you. It's either like an idea or it's kind of like the execution or whatever it might be. So being able to remove like you as a party from it and being like, forget me, let me try and do this. Does this work? No, yes. Whereas like the imposter syndrome side is more of like the lingering constant, like I don't deserve to be here, or like people don't, like I'm gonna be like exposed as a fraud because like I actually, this time like I slept, and this time like, you know, like all of these people are working this hard. And I feel like imposter syndrome, you can either enjoy where you are, or you can constantly have this voice. And of course, it's not as easy as that. It's not an on-off switch. But for me, it's been like, okay, even if I am like a huge fraud and I don't deserve to be here, might as well enjoy it. I can either not enjoy it or enjoy it. And so it's kind of like looking at yourself like in a bit of like, you can kind of take the piss out of yourself a bit and just be like, actually, like, yeah, I could be here. It could have been like, this could have been easy, or I could have met this person, or whatever it might be. Everyone has that. Everyone's job is easier in some way and harder in some way than you think it is. So everyone has all of these moments. And then just being able to be like, okay, but I'm here, so I might as well enjoy it. I might as well make it better. I might as well just work. And the worst thing you can do is stop yourself doing that because of this actual like self-confidence, self-doubt. And so, yeah, for me, I just remove like myself from the situation and kind of just look at things practically and go, is this me thinking this logically? Am I doubting this because it's not going to work? Is it something that's helpful? Or is it something that is just me, you know, deciding to doubt myself? And then being able to remove myself is like, okay, cool. No, I can actually do this, and here's my plan of action.
You know what?
Grace got the gems, innit?
That is a proper gem. I think.
We were all like, oh my God. Life coach.
But you know, actually, what you both said is all about breaking doubt down. If you like, imagine doubt as a brick, and it's like, right, I need to break it down. I need to figure out what it is that is causing this doubt, and then plan around it. Like, if my doubt is coming from a lack of skills, how do I upskill? If my doubt is coming from the fact that I don't feel comfortable in a room, how do I build up confidence to step into a room and own the meeting? But doubt is not just one massive, like, ridiculous thing that lingers in your brain. It's a combination of different things. If you break it down, you might be able to actually plan around it. Like, figure out the plan to get through it, over it, around it, or whatever. But don't just let it sit there and hold you back from doing something that you should do.
Break your doubt down. Book 2?
Yeah, well, I've got an example there is I've had to do loads of public speaking talks for my current almost previous job.
I love that you've just resigned on camera. My current almost previous job.
I'm in my notice period. And I'm not a person who goes on stage. Before I took this job, I would shy away. I've always been this quiet one in school. In fact, my parents told a parents' evening, your son doesn't talk enough. We're worried about him. So for me going on stage, I would literally be like Eminem, knees weak, palms heavy, vomit. Maybe not the vomit belt, but I'd be sweating and so nervous the night before, and I can't sleep. And then I realized like all I had to do was, where is this doubt coming from? Nervousness. I don't feel like I can speak on stage. So I did a speaking course and presentation skills. Rehearse, know what my material beforehand, know where the jokes are. And then when I did it once, it's like, yeah, made messes here and there, but you learn as you do. So you do to learn.
Well, guys, I think that's the perfect place to end the episode. Remember, you can grab your copy of How to Build on Apple Books, links in the description, and let us know what your biggest takeaway from the episode was in the comments. We'd love to hear from you.